Had some thoughts about Chess 960 or Fischer Random Chess. I think it's something that is gaining in recognition and appreciation, and you see it played, by top players in the world. I remember a really cool event. I think it was 2018, where Wesley So defeated Magnus Carlsen. So you see all the top players pretty much are doing Chess 960. Nepo's really into it. Nakamura's really into it. So it's not like something super fringy. Maybe a decade ago it was. I actually looked at search results over Google Trends over about a decade, and the rest of the world picked up on it well before America did. I don't know. Maybe it was around the pandemic boom or something several years ago when it began being searched more and more in the U.S. So I guess we're a little behind on that, but it's picking up, and a lot of it's definitely about some of the top players in the world. So it's not like the argument isn't out there. Although I think there's probably a lot of misunderstanding about it as to why Chess 960 is so amazing, why it's necessary for chess improvement, and or why it's just enjoyable, why it's an amazing form of chess, possibly the future of chess. Although the standard version that has been here for a few hundred years, of course, chess has evolved so much over the centuries, and previous versions of chess like Senet from Egypt, which had, I think, the three rows and the chessmen and stuff like that. So it's evolved a lot, although obviously the current version is there because it's so awesome. I mean, the power of the queen, and en passant's a little tricky, I think, just because the pawns are able to move twice at some point. I don't know. I think a lot of these changes occurred around 1500 or so. One of my students looked it up. So en passant was kind of necessary because it's like, hey, that's not fair. You can move twice and pass that pawn. So yeah, I guess en passant became necessary largely because of that. So anyway, I do think the rules are pretty good right now. The problem is, though, that it's just the same position. So chess 960 has every combination of legal positions that would involve two rooks, right? You have to two rooks on both sides, either side of the king, so you can still castle kingside or queenside, which looks kind of funny sometimes. Pretty fun when you like castle kingside across the entire board, things like that. So I was turning, so I have to slightly distracted. Stream of consciousness, double task. I'm obviously focusing on the road, but no less so listening to the radio or speaking on the phone. But yeah, I think the rules are pretty good right now. It's just the notion that there need to be fresh positions. That's a huge part of it. So it's fresh. Now you might say you're jaded because you like chess 960. That's part of it too. I think the novelty is nice, and once the novelty of regular chess wears off, it kind of renews that novelty for you, right? So, but I don't think you have to be there. But along with that comes experience. So you get better and better at chess, and a huge part of that is understanding pawn structure, which is obviously a huge part of mastering chess. And now I'll get to the part, this is the main thing I was thinking about, is kind of try to make this argument for chess 960, which is it's about outplaying your opponent, being an uncompromising player. And if you study Fischer, for example, some of the best players, you see they're utterly uncompromising in their play. That's really something I'm into. It's just, you should maximize your forces. It's not about disrespecting your opponent, but it's more like being intrepid. You have to be fearless, and you have to seek to mold the position in your favor. That's how you outplay your opponent. You're fearless. You're responding objectively to the board. It doesn't mean you have to try to swindle your opponent or trick them. I mean, hey, it's like I say, if you have a trap that's there and it doesn't harm your position, try to set it. If it doesn't work, it's like bringing it to Kasparov's quote, always expect your opponent will make the best move. So expect the best response, but if you can set the trap, and even if it has the best response, fine. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent, but the point is that you're trying to outplay your opponent. You're trying to outplay your opponent. So chess 960 allows that in a different way from regular chess, I think, because of the independent thinking that's required in chess 960. So in other words, if you're playing normal chess, the structures are more predictable. Now, that's not to say that you won't get the same structures out of 960. That's my point, actually, that you can try to get there favorably. One is that you should be able to handle any structure. That's funny. I just got a snack there yesterday. I was like searching around DC, like, where's the snack? that liquor store. It's pretty much just alcohol. There's like a little section that has these crappy snacks. But yeah, it was something. I feel like, oh, that wasn't healthy. I'm trying to stay healthy. But anyway, yeah. So it's about outplaying your opponent, and a big part of that is molding the position in your favor, right? That's a huge part of it. And yeah, and that requires understanding pawn structure. So it's kind of like, your regular chess might actually, the standard position whatever it is, and I don't know if it's position 1 or whatever you call it, that's about understanding your basic patterns, basic openings. That's great. So you learn how to play those positions. But the training wheels are there because you arrive there in a predictable way, and you could simply memorize. So not only can you memorize the first, depending on how sharp or theoretical the opening is, maybe the first 10 to 20 or more moves. And you could use, obviously, Stockfish or whatever computer you like, engine you like, to come up with the best moves even deeper than theory so far has indicated. But the thing is, it's not just the memorization. Is that you memorize how to get somewhere. Let's say even if it's 10 moves in, 15 moves in, something like a London or whatever, that structure. You're in a London structure. Right out of the first several moves, you know what to do, right? You already know what to do. So, and you could be at 1800 and be playing against a master, and you might be fine, if you can achieve kind of some sort of equilibrium, or you just know how to handle it. So yeah, Isolani, for example, you're going to get an Isolani after out of a Tarrasch defense, or Tarrasch, or however, I'm not sure, I call it Tarrasch, out of a Tarrasch defense, right? Whereas, for example, d4, d5, c4, e6, and then usually c5 is coming right away, or knight f6, and then c5. But standard would be you're just immediately d5, e6, c5, and because of the pawn tension, usually white will capture, and you'll be able to create an Isolani. And you just learn how to handle the Isolani, right? Sure, there's still deep understanding required, but you could really study the Isolani. You can study books about it. You can watch YouTube videos about it. You can watch Kasparov games, Capablanca games, that really nice game where he has an isolated pawn on c6 against Lasker, toward the end of that championship. He has a pawn on c6. He reinforces his control over d5, which blockades the d4 Isolani. Then the c6 pawn captures on d5, gets rid of his Isolani. So that's a deep game. That's a really deep game about the Isolani. So this is something you can just study, right? And sure, there are various iterations of how to handle an Isolani, but you can get an Isolani out of certain openings, so you can prepare for it, or whatever the structure is. Certain types of Sicilian structures, for example, a closed Sicilian. And so you can get there predictably. You have your training wheels on. You know what the plans are. So the novelty of Chess 960, there are 960 different versions. So you have the randomness means that you have to determine right off the bat, how do I adapt to this? And can I actually arrive at a structure that I want? Now, it may have some nuances. There might be slight distinctions from a closed Sicilian, but you might be like, yeah, you know what? I know the closed Sicilian, so I can go like, e4, f4 type of thing, or it might be on the opposite side of the board. It might be look more like a Queen's Gambit or something. Maybe your king's over there, so it's moot, right? It's essentially like a king's closed Sicilian structure, or a king's Indian structure, or whatever it may be. Or maybe there's an equivalent to like a weak f pawn, a pawn near the king that's only guarded by the king. So you pick up on those patterns, but of course there are nuances pretty much specific to that position, which will to some degree, maybe to a large degree, differ from a typical position that you might get out of a standard opening, like a closed Sicilian or a Tarrasch defense leading to an Isolani or whatever it may be. So you have to use your independent thinking to figure out what to do based on that unique structure. And there are many ways to do it, right? You have to using your independent thinking. There might be like 5 viable plans, setups. Think about your setup. There are going to be several of those that you could pursue. And then obviously you're going to tango with your opponent based on what they do, right? So, yeah, there's the independent thinking. Your understanding of pawn structure, again, molding, what I like to call molding the position, shaping the position in your favor. That's where you show your willpower, your uncompromising approach in the spirit of, I like to think Fischer. And by the way, a few asides, but I would, kind of blitz through some Fischer games before a tournament, like a blitz tournament actually once. I yeah, and that helped a lot. Just the feeling. It's a feeling for the game. It's a sense of how he flings some players, they just fling the pieces around, but in a harmonious way. It's a feeling. It's intuition. And it's an uncompromising attitude, fearless. And that's going to lead you to seek imbalance. It's going to most likely not to play symmetrical openings. Although even there, if you have a symmetrical opening like whatever, or Petrov defense, you should still, from either side, seek imbalance when you can. But that's part of the uncompromising play. Well, someone talks about how to reassess your chess, how to understand imbalances, and actively create them. That's the key part of actively, using your willpower to outplay your opponent. So that's really my argument, thesis here, is about actively trying to outplay your opponent and doing so through the molding of pawn structure. So in general, I would say to be adhering to that, I think. And that's a part of fighting. Oh, Sunday only? Oh, that's terrible. Monday to Sunday, 7 a.m. to midnight. At least they should let you off on the weekends. So yeah, actively molding the position. That's really the key. Whatever form of chess you want, you can't be afraid. You're trying to outplay. You're trying to assert your willpower. You're trying to show, why you're better than your opponent. That's the contest, right? Had a couple situations, but instead I'm driving, where we're both trying to be nice. It's like that commercial, right? The funny commercial. You're both waiting for each other. Someone in someone's seats, but yeah. So in that sense, yeah, it's a little bit of that's a friendly tango. Yeah, and also the way I view chess is it doesn't even have to be, it is a competition, but you could view it as a dance. I view it objectively. Pieces are dancing around. You're just trying to find the best move. And that's how you can avoid some of the psychological pitfalls. So I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say, and I'm just parking, so I think that works out. Yeah, I think I went through using this platform. If not, I'm just ranting to myself anyway, and maybe hopefully clarifying something about Chess 960, but by extension, chess in general. And it's chess. I mean, it's still, that's the beautiful thing about it. It's not some random variant like, such as Crazy House. But even Crazy House is useful. As I was marching toward, oscillating a lot, moving toward the master title, which was after a big delay, after a big kind of hiatus. And sometimes that could be helpful, but it's hard to get back on the wagon again, right? In the saddle again, whatever. So yeah, stuff like that, like Fischer Random, is great, right? To think creatively. Yeah, Bug House or Crazy House, it's about creativity, visualization. So every single one, and I was actually just playing with my student a little bit at the end. We were playing losers chess, take me chess, whatever you want to call it, giveaway chess, and that's like reverse logic. We were talking about logic and everything. So it's logic, but it's reverse logic from what you'd expect. The logic is you need to give away your pieces, and forcefully. So it still involves cool combos and everything. But yeah, it's whatever the variant is, it's very useful, and each one's useful. But I think Chess 960 is so similar to regular chess, but it's just independent thinking off the bat, creativity. But get off your training wheels, get off the track that you're used to, get off the beaten path, which we can certainly do with sidelines. But again, it's so much memorization that's required that sometimes you can use your creativity, but you got to stay on top of the modern theory / look at things with Stockfish or whatever. And it's a fun theoretical battle, yes, but I think one of the reasons why the main reason why Fischer sought this is because he knew that no matter how weak or weaker the opponent was, let's say, than him, from an egotistical perspective, but again, it is a competition, and however, whatever the split or the distance between the strengths, it can help to give the weaker player a crutch. It's a crutch, right? It's a crutch. They can memorize things. Not just memorize, but have a clear plan that's attached to that. The types of tactics that are attached to a dragon, for instance, which was great. It was great to have my training wheels in high school. I memorized the lines. I read a Goofeld book actually, which talked about secrets of the Sicilian dragon, right? So that's all great as you're learning, but then it's time to take off the training wheels and play chess unencumbered by all the theory, which will again, it's great, it will help you, but you're pigeonholing yourself, you're tracking yourself, one tracking in each opening, and you're going down a track that so many have gone down, which is interesting, but that helps your opponent, and you don't want to help your opponent. So again, it's not from like, oh, I'm just trying to be counterculture about it. It's not necessarily. Now it's funny, and maybe back in the day, but it's become so mainstream now. It's a lot of things. I was thinking about it. Like for example, like I felt like I was shouting from the hilltops or mountaintops or whatever about things like back in the day, back in the day, like a decade ago, about things like internet privacy, or like not using apps, or like criminal justice reform, like prison reform. Like that's mainstream now, right? Obviously, the environmental movement has been going on for a long time. Merging of the civil rights movement, like environmental justice, that stuff's been going on for a long time. But there's some stuff that's especially with technology. Like it felt like, at least in my circle, I guess, and or people that I'm familiar with, like not being familiar. Well, yeah, those are people that are on using those platforms. Of course, there are people that never use them. But anyway, those are things like kind of not mainstream. But now these things are becoming mainstream. So so it's interesting. I don't know what I'm getting at exactly, but it's interesting because again, it's something that's not. Yeah, again, it's just something that back in the day, or especially in the U.S. I'm talking within a decade or two, but within the last 20 years, let's say 21st century, it hasn't been that popular, but it's really picked up steam, I guess, along with the proliferation of chess in general. And I just think it's really interesting. But remember, what I'm getting at, I think the most important point is it's not, in other words, it's not just to be funky. It's not just to be weird, which is cool. That's good in its own right. But it's also, which is fun, which is fresh. It feels a little more novel, 960 times more novel than regular chess. But it's about asserting your willpower. It's about your creativity. It's about shaping the position with your mind, which is the beautiful thing about chess. Yes, common structures, but finding a way to get there that could throw off your opponent. That's another thing. I was kind of getting at it. But again, like let's say you understand types of Sicilian structures. Well, you're going to get there. It's this kind of trickery in sort of a trap. It's a more nuanced trap. You're trapping your opponent into going into a line that a type of position that really well. So that's another thing. Another part of the crutch is not just that you can know that structure really well and do and succeed to a large degree, even if you're not, let's say, not that strong or weaker against stronger opponents, you can still do well, higher than you should be able to, because in other words, you're using it to compensate for any other weaknesses, which you shouldn't be doing. But what I'm getting at is it's also by not only that you really would do really well in those positions, but also that you may just hate other positions. Like, when you're preparing for someone, you might prepare against an attacker, against a passive player, against someone who likes close positions, and so forth. So it's kind of like you don't know what kind of player there are necessarily in chess 96. And it should be objective. It shouldn't ultimately matter that much. But still, and more so in preparation, you're trying to get them out of the lines they want. But here, everyone's out of the lines they're used to, and that's what you're going for. And by the way, that will strengthen your regular play, just like Crazy House, crazy, right? Crazy visualization. It is crazy, and that will help your visualization in general. Chess 960 will help your ability in general to handle many types of openings, many types of positions. Because pretty much no matter what, the cool thing is that no matter what opening you start with, you're going to arrive at some novel position. Obviously, that's chess. That's the beautiful thing about chess. But this is just to the nth degree, or times 960, which each increases exponentially, which is why there can't really be theory for each position. That would be too exponential. Like all them, it's hard enough for one position. But it's more, the theory would be more general concepts of how to mold that position and so forth. How to attack the so-called the new F7 and things like that. So yeah, just something to think about, food for thought. And ranting about chess 960. But I love chess 960, so hopefully that might actually, I hope that it will make an argument that might be palatable to some. Maybe if you're skeptical of it, and maybe you are kind of on the fence, that you would try. Give it a shot, see how it goes. All right. Have a good one, and enjoy your chess, whatever form it takes.